I never imagined that the very land my great-great-grandparents tilled with their bare hands, the soil soaked in generations of sweat and stories, could become a battleground for a smug HOA Karen hell-bent on stealing it all, until she slapped a bogus lien on my 180-year-old farmhouse, thinking I was just another spineless resident she could bully into submission. But she had no clue I wasn't even part of her precious association. And what started as petty harassment exploded into an epic showdown that left her exposed, humiliated, and me reclaiming every inch of my legacy with a vengeance that still makes me smirk when I drive past the "For Sale" sign on her overpriced McMansion. My name's Elias Hawthorne, and at 45, I'd spent the last decade nursing this sprawling 20-acre farmstead back to life after inheriting it from my folks, who got it from their folks, tracing all the way back to 1845, when the Hawthorne family crossed the Appalachians with nothing but a mule and a dream of fertile ground. The house itself was a weathered beauty, clapboard siding faded to a soft gray, wide porch sagging just enough to creak under your boots like an old friend's welcome. And inside, rooms filled with the ghosts of harvest suppers and whispered lullabies. The air thick with the scent of aged oak and faint lavender from my grandmother's sachets tucked in drawers. I wasn't some corporate drone. I ran a small organic herb farm out of the back fields, selling bundles of rosemary and thyme to local markets. The kind of quiet life that let me wake to rooster crows and end days with sunsets painting the barn red. Our little corner of rural Virginia sat just on the edge of Willow Creek Estates, a cookie-cutter subdivision that sprouted up like weeds about 10 years back, gobbling up farmland with vinyl-sided monstrosities and lawns mowed to military precision. The HOA there, Willow Creek Homeowners Association, was run by folks who treated their bylaws like holy writ, fining residents for untrimmed hedges or the wrong shade of mailbox blue. But crucially, my property predated their development by over a century and a half. It was grandfathered in, completely outside their jurisdiction, a fact etched in yellowed deeds I'd framed on my office wall like badges of independence. That's what made Karen, real name Victoria Langford, though everyone whispered Vicky the Viper, such a perfect storm of entitlement. She was mid-50s, with a helmet of ash-blonde hair that never moved in the wind, always clad in athleisure that screamed, "I lunch at the club," and she drove a gleaming white SUV plastered with HOA stickers like war trophies. Vicky had moved into Willow Creek 5 years ago, clawing her way onto the board with promises of preserving our values, which really meant expanding her empire one coerced compliance at a time. She'd eyed my farm from day one, coveting the open fields for some half-baked vision of a community park, or, rumor had it, flipping it for a fat profit to developers itching to extend the subdivision's tentacles. It started innocently enough, or as innocent as Vicky's schemes ever got. A certified letter arriving one crisp autumn morning, the envelope crisp and official-looking, stamped with the HOA's gold-embossed seal. I remember tearing it open over coffee on the porch, steam curling from my mug, as hickory leaves skittered across the planks, expecting maybe a neighborly invite to a block party. Instead, it was a notice of violation. My weathered fence along the shared tree line was deemed an eyesore detracting from aesthetic harmony, demanding removal or replacement with vinyl within 30 days, under threat of fines. I chuckled at first, folding the paper with a shake of my head. Didn't they know this fence had stood since my granddad's day? Posts hand-hewn from black walnut that bordered the original homestead plat? I scribbled a polite reply, citing the 1845 deed and enclosing a photocopy, explaining my property's exemption, and mailed it off with a stamp that felt like a shield. Days turned to weeks with no response, and I thought that was that. Back to weeding the sage beds and haggling over basil prices at the farmer's market. But Vicky wasn't one to take no for an answer. She thrived on the chase, her power derived from the quiver of spines she bent. Next came the drive-bys, her SUV crawling the fence line at dusk, binoculars glinting as she jotted notes on a leather-bound pad, like some suburban Sherlock hunting crimes against curb appeal. I'd spot her from the kitchen window, silhouetted against the fading light, and feel a prickle of unease, not fear exactly, but the low hum of knowing a fox was sniffing too close to the henhouse. Then the complaints rolled in, anonymous at first, funneled through the county zoning office. Noise violations from my ancient tractor's rumble, which barely idled above a purr. Runoff from my rain barrels allegedly flooding a Willow Creek gutter, despite the topography sloping the other way. Even a wild claim that my heirloom chickens were feral pests, escaping to peck at manicured lawns. Each one I countered with records, decades of clean inspections, surveys proving boundaries, photos of the birds safely penned, but it was exhausting, chipping away at the peace I'd carved here. My neighbor, old Mr. Hargrove, who farmed the adjacent 10 acres and shared my non-HOA status, caught me venting one evening over shared fence mending, our hammers syncing like a duet as the sun dipped low. "Vicky's got dollar signs in her eyes for that back 40 of yours, Elias," he grunted, wiping sweat with a bandana that smelled of earth and tobacco. Heard her at the diner, bragging about reclaiming the old Hawthorne place for the greater good. His words landed like a stone in still water, rippling doubt through my resolve. Was this just busybody nonsense or something more sinister? I started sleeping lighter, ears tuned to gravel crunching under tires, and took to double-checking the gate locks at night. The real escalation hit like a thunderclap on a sweltering July afternoon, the air heavy with humidity that made my shirt cling like a second skin as I unloaded crates of fresh-picked lavender from the truck bed. Purple blooms spilling fragrant clouds that masked the approaching storm. Vicky didn't come alone this time. She brought reinforcements. 2 burly guys in polo shirts emblazoned with a landscaping company logo, hauling chainsaws and clippers like an invasion force. She strode across my driveway uninvited, her espadrilles sinking slightly in the gravel, clipboard in hand and a smile sharp as a switchblade. "Elias Hawthorne, Victoria Langford, Willow Creek HOA President. We've given you ample warnings, but since you insist on ignoring community standards, we're handling this ourselves under our enforcement protocols." Her voice was honey over gravel, sweet but grinding, and before I could stammer a protest, my mind reeling from the audacity, she waved the men toward the fence, their engines roaring to life with a guttural snarl that drowned out the cicadas. I dropped the crate, lavender exploding in a bruised purple haze across the ground, and lunged forward, heart slamming against my ribs like a caged bird. "You can't do this! This is private property, not yours, not the HOA's." But she just arched a perfectly penciled brow, flipping open her clipboard to a page dense with legalese print. "Oh, but we can, Mr. Hawthorne. See, under Section 14B of our covenants, extended via recent county ordinance, we have rights to abate nuisances on adjacent parcels. Your fence qualifies." It was nonsense. A twisted interpretation I'd later learn was pulled from thin air. But in that moment, with sawdust already flying and chunks of my granddad's walnut thudding to the earth, it felt like the world tilting off its axis. The scent of fresh-cut wood mingled with the acrid bite of 2-stroke exhaust, turning my stomach as years of history splintered under their blades. I fumbled for my phone, dialing the non-emergency line with trembling fingers, shouting over the din about trespassing and property damage. But the dispatcher's calm queries only fueled my frustration. Vicky watched me, that smile unwavering, as if my outrage was just another notch on her belt. "Go ahead, call whoever you like," she purred, loud enough for the workers to pause and smirk. "We've got the paperwork. You'll be hearing from our lawyers about the cleanup costs." The line connected just as the first post toppled. crashing with a finality that echoed in my bones, and I yelled into the receiver, "They're destroying my fence right now! Send someone!" But even as the words left my lips, a deeper dread coiled in my gut. This wasn't about a fence anymore. This was declaration of war. And, as the dust settled on the mangled remains of my boundary, Vicky dusted off her hands and turned to leave, tossing over her shoulder. Consider this your final notice. Next, we'll be discussing that lien for the abatement fees. And trust me, Elias, you won't like where that's headed. Her SUV peeled out, leaving me amid the wreckage, phone limp in my hand, the sirens in the distance too late to mend what was broken. Little did she know that Lien she dangled like a guillotine was the spark that would ignite my fight back, because buried in my deed box was proof that could unravel her whole fraudulent scheme, and I was done playing nice. The sirens grew louder as I stood in the wreckage of my fence, the air thick with sawdust and the bitter tang of crushed lavender, my heart still hammering from Vicky's brazen attack on my family's land. The walnut posts, carved by my granddad's hands, lay splintered like fallen soldiers, and the audacity of her parting shot about a lien, burned in my chest like a coal. I wasn't just mad. I was livid, the kind of anger that makes your vision pulse red but sharpens your mind to a razor's edge. I snapped photos of the destruction with my phone, each click capturing the jagged stumps and scattered wood chips, my boots crunching through the debris as I fought to keep my voice steady for the sheriff's deputy, pulling up in a dust-swirled cruiser. Deputy Clara Evans, a no-nonsense woman with a braid tucked under her cap, stepped out, her eyes narrowing as she surveyed the scene. "Elias, what in blazes happened here?" she asked, her drawl familiar from years of buying my basil at the market. I poured out the story, Vicky's letters, her drive-bys, the landscaping goons she'd unleashed, and now this threat of a lien for abatement fees on a property that wasn't even under her HOA's thumb. Clara scribbled notes, her pen scratching like a metronome, and took her own photos, muttering about overreach as she inspected the HOA's so-called paperwork Vicky had left behind, a single sheet of jargon-heavy nonsense claiming emergency rights to correct boundary violations. I handed her the copy of my deed, its edges worn but its words ironclad, proving my land's exemption from Willow Creek's grasp. "This is private property, Clara," I said, my voice tight. "They had no right to touch a single post." She nodded, her jaw set, and promised to file a report for trespassing and vandalism, but warned it'd take time to sort out, especially with Vicky's connections on the county board. As her cruiser rolled away, I felt the weight of that. Truth settle in. Vicky wasn't just a Karen with a clipboard, she was a political player, schmoozing with local officials at wine-soaked fundraisers, her influence woven into the town's power grid like ivy choking a tree. Back inside, the farmhouse's cool shadows did little to soothe me. I sank into the creaky dining chair, the same one where my dad used to carve roasts at Sunday dinners, and spread out the HOA's letters, my deed, and Vicky's latest notice on the scarred oak table. My fingers traced the deed's faded ink, a map of boundaries drawn when Virginia was barely a state, and I felt a flicker of my ancestors' stubbornness stir in me. They'd fought off drought, blight, and worse to keep this land. I wasn't about to let a suburban dictator in yoga pants steal it, but I needed more than righteous anger. I needed a plan, and fast, before Vicky's lien threat became reality. I called Mr. Hargrove, who answered with a gruff, "Heard the chainsaws from my porch, Elias. That woman's got gall." Over coffee, at his kitchen table, the air smelling of bacon grease and old wood, he filled me in on Vicky's history, She'd strong-armed neighbors into selling parcels for pennies, citing trumped-up violations, then funneled the land to developers for kickbacks. "She's been sniffing around your farm for years," he said, eyes glinting with the kind of cunning you earn from 70 years of outsmarting foxes. "That Lien talk? It's her endgame. She'll slap it on, tie you up in court, and wait till you're broke enough to sell." His words hit like a gut punch, but they also lit a fire. I spent that evening poring over county records online, my laptop screen casting a blue glow across the parlor's peeling wallpaper, digging into property laws and HOA regulations. My farm wasn't just exempt, it was protected under historic preservation clauses, thanks to its age and unbroken Hawthorne ownership. Vicky's ordinance was a lie, a flimsy pretext that wouldn't hold up in court, but she was banking on me not knowing that, or not having the guts to fight. I started documenting everything, every letter, every drive-by I'd spotted, every complaint filed against me. I even found a grainy photo from last year's market. Vicky's SUV parked suspiciously near my fence, her silhouette hunched over that damn clipboard. My phone buzzed with texts from neighbors, folks like Mrs. Carter, who ran the bakery in town and despised the HOA's cupcake regulations, and young Tim, a mechanic whose garage bordered Willow Creek and who'd been hit with fines for excessive noise. They'd heard about the fence and were spitting mad, offering to vouch for me or dig up dirt on Vicky. "She tried to fine me for my daughter's swing set," Mrs. Carter texted, adding a string of angry emojis. "Let's take her down." Their support felt like a lifeline. But Vicky wasn't done escalating. The next morning, as I swept up the last of the sawdust, a courier dropped off a registered letter that stopped my breath. An official-looking notice from the county, claiming a lien had been filed against my property for $15,000 in community maintenance fees tied to the fence removal and alleged environmental violations from my farm's runoff. The document was stamped with the Willow Creek HOA seal, Vicky's name scrawled in triumph at the bottom. I stood frozen on the porch, the paper trembling in my hands, the morning sun glaring off the fields like a spotlight on my worst fears. A lien like that could cripple me, freeze my ability to sell or borrow, maybe even force foreclosure if I couldn't pay. My mind raced back to Hargrove's warning. This was her endgame, a legal chokehold to pry my land loose. I called Clara, who confirmed the lien was filed but smelled fishy, promising to flag it to the county attorney. I also reached out to my cousin Lena, a paralegal in Richmond who'd helped me with the farm's probate years back. Over a crackling phone line, she was already fuming. "Elias, this is fraud. HOAs can't lien non-members, and that ordinance she's citing doesn't exist. Send me everything." I emailed her the documents, my fingers shaking not from fear now, but from a growing resolve. Lena's words were a spark, and the neighbor's texts fanned it into a flame. I wasn't just fighting for my farm. I was fighting for everyone Vicky had bullied, every family she'd fined into submission. But the real bombshell landed that afternoon when Hargrove called me over, his voice low and urgent. He'd been poking around at the county clerk's office, charming the desk staff with his old man wiles, and found something juicy. Vicky had filed liens on 2 other non-HOA properties in the past, both now sold to a developer with ties to her husband's real estate firm. "It's a pattern, Elias," he said, passing me a photocopied page from the county ledger. The ink smudged, but the names clear. "She's done this before, and she's banking on you folding like the others." I stared at the paper, my pulse quickening as the pieces clicked. Vicky wasn't just greedy. She was running a scam, using the HOA as a front to extort land for profit. The realization hit like a thunderbolt, electrifying my anger into something sharper, something dangerous. I spent the night rigging a cheap security camera from Tim's garage, its lens trained on the fence line, and started a group chat with Mrs. Carter, Tim, and Hargrove, dubbing it Operation Viper Trap. We swapped ideas. Tim offered to check his own cameras for footage of Vicky's drive-bys. Mrs. Carter knew a reporter at the local paper itching for a scandal, and Hargrove had a buddy at the Historical Society who could bolster my preservation claim. As the moon rose over the fields, silvering the rows of sage, I felt the tide turning. Vicky thought she'd cornered me, but she'd just handed me the rope to hang her scheme. The lien was her mistake, a paper trail that could unravel her whole operation, and I was ready to pull the thread. But just as I was mapping out my next move, my phone pinged with a new email from the county. A hearing notice scheduled in 2 weeks to resolve the lien and assess additional penalties for my non-compliance. Vicky wasn't slowing down. She was doubling down, and the clock was ticking faster than I'd expected. The email from the county about the lien hearing hit like a cold wind, rattling the shutters of my old farmhouse. But instead of dread, it stoked a fire in me. A quiet fury sharpened by the proof piling up on my dining table, Vicky's fraudulent lien, Hargrove's ledger photocopy, and a growing stack of texts from neighbors ready to fight back. I wasn't just Elias Hawthorne, herb farmer, anymore. I was a man with a 180-year-old legacy to defend. And Vicky Langford, with her HOA crown and fake ordinances, had picked the wrong battle. The morning after the hearing notice arrived, I woke before dawn, the sky still bruised purple, and brewed coffee strong enough to wake the dead, its bitter steam curling through the kitchen as I planned my counterattack. The lien was a bluff, Lena had confirmed. HOAs couldn't touch non-members, and the Section 14B ordinance Vicky cited was pure fiction, not found in any county code. But bluffs work when you're too scared or broke to call them, and Vicky was counting on that, assuming I'd crumble under legal fees or sell the farm to escape the noose. She didn't know me. I'd spent years coaxing life from stubborn soil. I wasn't about to wilt now. First, I needed airtight evidence, something that would make a judge sit up and take notice. I started with the security camera Tim had helped me install, its grainy feed now saved to a hard drive, capturing Vicky's SUV circling my property 3 times the week before the fence attack, her license plate clear as day. Tim, bless his gearhead heart, had his own footage from his garage. 2 clips of Vicky's goons scoping my fence days earlier, their landscaping truck idling as they pointed and measured. "Caught 'em red-handed," Tim texted, attaching the files with a winking emoji. I burned copies onto a USB, labeling it Viper evidence, my hands steady despite the adrenaline humming through me. Next, I dug deeper into county records, my laptop humming late into the night, the glow reflecting off the parlor's cracked plaster walls. With Lena's guidance over a crackling Zoom call, I found the smoking gun. Vicky's lien filings on those other non-HOA properties Hargrove mentioned, both linked to her husband's real estate firm, which had flipped the parcels for 6-figure profits within months. The pattern was clear: extort, lien, force a sale, cash out. I printed the records, the paper crisp under my fingers, and felt a grim satisfaction imagining Vicky's face when this hit a courtroom. But I needed more than documents. I needed the law on my side. Lena connected me with her old law school friend, Marcus Tate, a pro bono attorney with a knack for dismantling bullies. Marcus drove out the next day, his beat-up sedan rattling down my gravel drive, and over sweet tea on the porch, the air heavy with the scent of honeysuckle, he pored over my evidence. "This is gold, Elias," he said, his voice low and confident, flipping through the deed and lien notice. "She's committed fraud, and that fence stunt? Straight-up vandalism. We'll file a counterclaim for damages and get that lien tossed." His words were a lifeline, but he warned me the hearing was a pressure cooker. Vicky's connections ran deep, and we'd need public support to tip the scales. That's where Operation Viper Trap came alive. Mrs. Carter organized a meeting at her bakery, the warm smell of cinnamon rolls masking the tension as a dozen neighbors crowded around mismatched tables, their faces a mix of anger and hope. There was Hargrove, his weathered hands clutching a thermos, Tim, grease still smudged on his knuckles, and even Mrs. Lopez, a Willow Creek resident who'd been fined for her kid's lemonade stand. We swapped stories, Vicky's fines, her threats, her smug assurances that the board always wins. I shared the lien documents and the developer connection, and gasps rippled through the room. "She's been shaking us down for years," Mrs. Lopez whispered, her eyes blazing. We brainstormed, voices low to avoid eavesdroppers, and hatched a plan. I'd confront Vicky at the hearing with Marcus, armed with our evidence, while the neighbors would rally outside. Drawing media attention, Mrs. Carter knew a reporter, Jenna Price, at the Willow Creek Gazette, who was itching for a scoop on HOA corruption. "She'll eat this up," Mrs. Carter said, her smile sharp as she passed around a tray of cookies. Tim offered to print flyers, and Hargrove volunteered to call his historical society Contact to nominate my farm for protected status, a legal shield that could block future HOA grabs. As the meeting broke up, the bakery's bell jingling behind us, I felt a surge of something new. Community, not just as neighbors, but as a united front. Back home, I kept building my arsenal. I scoured the HOA's own bylaws, downloaded from their poorly designed website, and found they'd violated their own rules by acting outside their boundaries. I cross-referenced every letter Vicky sent, noting dates and contradictions, and organized them in a binder, each page a brick in the wall I was building. I even walked the fence line at dusk, the air cool and heavy with the scent of damp earth, and found one of Vicky's landscaping crew's discarded cigarette butts, bagged it as evidence of their trespass, and smiled at the thought of her smugness cracking. Lena emailed me a draft of the counterclaim Marcus was preparing, alleging fraud, vandalism, and intentional infliction of emotional distress, with damages pegged at $50,000 for the fence and my lost business days. The numbers made my head spin, but Marcus insisted it was justified, and the thought of Vicky footing that bill sent a thrill through me. I wasn't just defending my farm anymore. I was exposing a predator. But Vicky wasn't idle. 2 days before the hearing, another letter arrived, this one from a law firm in town, claiming I'd breached community standards by harassing the HOA with my complaints. It demanded I retract my vandalism report or face a defamation suit, signed by a lawyer I later learned was Vicky's golf buddy. The audacity was almost laughable, but it tightened the knot in my gut. She was trying to scare me into silence, banking on my fear of legal bills. I forwarded it to Marcus, who called it a desperate bluff, and added it to our fraud case. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep, the house creaking around me like it was whispering encouragement. I sat at the kitchen table, the binder open, my great-grandfather's deed beside it, its ink a testament to endurance. I rehearsed my testimony, picturing Vicky's face as I laid out her lies. The neighbors were ready. Mrs. Carter had confirmed Jenna would be there with a camera crew, and Tim had plastered flyers across town, their bold text screaming, "Stop HOA abuse!" Hargrove's Historical Society contact had fast-tracked my farm's nomination, faxing a letter to the county that morning. Everything was in place, but as I stared out at the moonlit fields, the rows of time silvered and still, doubt crept in. What if Vicky's connections pulled strings? What if the judge bought her charm? The hearing was tomorrow, and I was walking into a lion's den with nothing but truth and a ragtag crew of neighbors. But as I flipped through the binder, touching the grainy photo of Vicky's SUV, the clip of Tim's footage, the ledger proving her scam, I felt the weight of my ancestors behind me. I was ready to spring the trap, And Vicky was about to walk right into it, oblivious to the noose tightening around her scheme. The hearing loomed like a storm cloud, and as I finally drifted to sleep, the old house groaning softly, I knew tomorrow would be the day her empire started to crack. The morning of the county hearing dawned sharp and clear, the kind of crisp October light that made the fields glow gold, but my stomach churned as I pulled on my best button-down, the collar stiff against my neck, and grabbed the binder that held Vicky Langford's undoing. Every document, photo, and video clip meticulously organized to expose her fraudulent lien and land-grabbing scam. I stepped onto the porch, the air carrying the faint sweetness of drying hay, and saw Mr. Hargrove's truck idling in the drive, his weathered face nodding encouragement as Mrs. Carter and Tim climbed out, their expressions a mix of nerves and defiance. We'd planned this like a military operation, and as we drove to the courthouse, the gravel crunching under the tires, I felt the weight of my neighbors' trust, their stories of Vicky's bullying woven into my own. The courthouse was a squat brick building in town, its steps crowded with a dozen Willow Creek residents holding signs that read, "Stop Ho Tyranny" and "Justice for Hawthorne." Thanks to Tim's flyer blitz, Jenna Price from the Willow Creek Gazette was there, her camera crew capturing the scene, the lens glinting as it panned across the growing crowd. My heart thudded, not just from nerves, but from the electric realization that this wasn't just my fight anymore. It was ours. Inside, the hearing room smelled of polished wood and stale coffee, the fluorescent lights buzzing as I took my seat beside Marcus, my attorney, whose calm smile steadied me. Vicky sat across the aisle, her ash-blonde hair immaculate, her navy blazer screaming authority as she whispered to her lawyer, a slick guy with a Rolex that caught the light. The judge, a stern woman named Judge Harlan with wire-rimmed glasses, called the room to order, her gavel's crack slicing through the murmurs. Marcus opened, his voice smooth but firm, laying out our case. The fraudulent lien, the vandalism of my fence, the HOA's overreach onto non-member property. He projected Tim's security footage on a screen, the grainy image of Vicky's SUV circling my farm, drawing gasps from the gallery. Then came the county ledger, showing her past liens on non-HOA properties, each tied to her husband's firm. I watched Vicky's face, expecting panic, but she just leaned back, arms crossed, her lips curling into that infuriating smirk, as if she'd already won. Her lawyer stood, dismissing our evidence as circumstantial, and countering with the defamation claim, accusing me of slandering the HOA with my complaints. He waved a stack of affidavits from Willow Creek residents, clearly coerced, claiming my farm was a nuisance, lowering their property values. The room felt hotter, the air pressing against my chest, but Marcus squeezed my arm, whispering, "She's overplaying her hand." Then it was my turn to testify. I stood, my boots echoing on the hardwood, and faced Judge Harlan, my voice steady as I recounted Vicky's harassment. The letters, the drive-bys, the chainsaws tearing down my granddad's fence. I held up the deed, its faded ink a testament to 180 years of Hawthorne resilience, and said, "This land isn't just mine. It's my family's legacy." And she tried to steal it with a lie. The crowd murmured, and I saw Jenna's pen scribbling furiously. Marcus submitted our counterclaim, detailing $50,000 in damages for the fence and emotional distress, and played the trump card, a letter from the Historical Society nominating my farm for protected status, which barred any liens or forced sales. Vicky's smirk faltered, her fingers twitching on her clipboard. Then she took the stand, her voice syrupy with fake concern, claiming the HOA acted in good faith to protect the community. But Marcus was ready. He grilled her on the fake ordinance, producing county records showing it didn't exist. "So, Ms. Langford," he said, his tone cutting, How do you explain filing a lien on a non-HOA property using a fabricated law? The room went silent, her lawyer's objections drowned out by Judge Harlan's sharp, "Answer the question," Vicky stammered, her face flushing as she muttered about clerical errors. But the judge's eyes narrowed, and I knew we had her. Outside, the crowd's chants grew louder, audible through the windows, and I caught a glimpse of Mrs. Lopez holding a sign that read, "Vicky's scam ends here." The energy shifted, like a storm breaking, and when Marcus played the landscaping crew's footage, showing their deliberate trespass, Vicky's lawyer slumped in his seat. Judge Harlan recessed for deliberation, but not before ordering the lien frozen pending her ruling, a small victory that made my neighbors cheer as we stepped outside for air. The sun was high now, warming the courthouse steps, and Mrs. Carter hugged me, her apron still dusted with flour. "You did it, Elias," she whispered, but I shook my head. This wasn't over. Back inside, Vicky tried one last desperate move. During the recess, she cornered me in the hallway, her perfume sharp and cloying, and hissed, "Drop this, Elias, or I'll make sure every developer in Virginia blacklists your farm." Her eyes were wild now, her composure cracking, but I leaned in, voice low. "You're not scaring me, Vicky. You're done." Her lawyer pulled her away, but the threat lingered, a reminder of how far she'd go. When the hearing resumed, Judge Harlan returned with a scowl that could curdle milk. She ruled the lien invalid, citing gross overreach and fraudulent intent, and dismissed Vicky's defamation claim as baseless. The gallery erupted, neighbors clapping as Vicky's face drained of color, her clipboard clattering to the floor. Harlan wasn't done. She referred Vicky's actions to the county attorney for potential criminal charges, including fraud and vandalism, and ordered the HOA to pay my legal fees. Marcus slapped my back, grinning, but the real blow came when Harlan approved my counterclaim, awarding $50,000 in damages to be paid by the HOA and Vicky personally. The crowd outside roared as we emerged, Jenna's camera rolling as she peppered me with questions. "How's it feel to take down an HOA bully?" she asked, and I grinned, the weight lifting from my shoulders, like planting a seed and watching it grow. But Vicky's downfall wasn't complete. She slunk out a side exit, avoiding the cameras, her SUV speeding off as neighbors jeered. I knew she'd try to wiggle free, maybe spin a sob story to her HOA cronies. But the tide had turned. Jenna's story hit the Gazette's front page the next day, headlined "HOA Scam Exposed," with Vicky's name in bold. Calls poured in from other victims, ready to sue, and the HOA board scheduled an emergency meeting to oust her. My farm was safe, the lien gone, but I wanted more. Not just victory, but a shield for others. As I drove home, the fields stretching wide under a pink sunset, I felt the earth itself exhale, like it knew we'd won this round. But the fight wasn't over. Vicky's developer friends wouldn't give up easily, and I needed to ensure my farm's protection for good. That night, sitting on the porch with a beer, the crickets singing and the air cool against my skin, I opened my laptop to draft a petition for permanent historic status, my fingers flying as I pictured Vicky's empire crumbling for good. The courthouse victory still buzzed in my veins as I drove back to the farm, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the fields, their golden rows of thyme and rosemary shimmering like a promise kept. But I knew Vicky Langford's defeat wasn't the end. She was a viper, and vipers don't slither away quietly. The air smelled of fresh-turned earth as I parked by the farmhouse, its weathered clapboards glowing warm in the light. And I felt a quiet pride knowing I'd defended this land, my family's 180-year legacy, against her greedy claws. Inside, the kitchen table was still strewn with evidence, my binder, the deed, Tim's USB of footage, and I sank into a chair, the wood creaking under me like an old friend, replaying the day's triumph. Judge Harlan's ruling had obliterated Vicky's lien, slapped her with $50,000 in damages, and sent her scam to the county attorney for criminal review. Jenna's front-page story in the Willow Creek Gazette, with its damning headline, had spread like wildfire, shared across local Facebook groups, and even picked up by a Richmond news station. My phone pinged with texts from neighbors. Mrs. Carter sent a photo of her bakery's new sign, "No Ho Allowed," with a winking emoji, and Tim reported Vicky's SUV hadn't been seen in Willow Creek since the hearing. Hargrove called, his gravelly voice triumphant. "Board's meeting tonight. Elias, word is, Vicky's out." I grinned, imagining her packing up her HOA stickers and yoga gear, but I wasn't naive. She'd tried to claw her way back, and I needed to lock in my farm's safety for good. That evening, under the porch's soft lantern glow, the air thick with the scent of drying lavender, I drafted the petition for permanent historic status with Marcus's help, citing the farm's unbroken Hawthorne ownership since 1845 and its role in Virginia's agricultural heritage. Hargrove's Historical Society contact fast-tracked it, and by week's end, the county approved the designation, shielding my land from future HOA grabs or developer schemes. The $50,000 from the counterclaim arrived soon after, wired directly from the HOA's coffers, Vicky's personal share included. A sting she'd feel for years. I used it to rebuild the fence, hiring a local craftsman to carve new walnut posts, each one a mirror of my granddad's, their rich grain gleaming under fresh varnish. The leftover funds went to the farm. New irrigation for the herb beds, a small greenhouse for year-round basil, and a donation to Mrs. Carter's bakery to fund free coffee for our Operation Viper Trap crew. The community rallied stronger than ever. Mrs. Lopez started a neighborhood watch to monitor HOA overreach, and Tim's flyers sparked a petition to reform Willow Creek's bylaws, stripping the board's unchecked power. Jenna's reporting didn't stop. Her follow-up exposé revealed Vicky's husband's firm was under state investigation for shady land deals, and whispers spread that Vicky had put her McMansion up for sale, her empire crumbling under the weight of her own greed. One crisp morning as I walked the fields, the dew soaking my boots and the air sharp with the promise of frost, I got a call from Clara, the deputy. "Thought you'd like to know," she said, her voice tinged with satisfaction. "Vicky's been charged. Fraud, vandalism, and conspiracy to commit extortion. She's looking at real time." I stood by the new fence, its posts solid and proud, and let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The farm felt alive again, the ghosts of my ancestors humming in the breeze as if they'd been cheering me on all along. I hosted a barbecue that weekend, the backyard filled with neighbors, Hargrove grilling burgers, Mrs. Carter passing out pies, Tim's kids chasing my chickens across the grass. Laughter mingled with the smoky scent of charcoal, and for the first time in months, I slept through the night. The house's creaks a lullaby of peace. Vicky's fall sent ripples beyond Willow Creek. Other HOAs in the county tightened their rules, scared straight by the scandal, and my farm became a local legend, the little homestead that took down a tyrant. I framed the historic status certificate next to the deed, a reminder of what stubbornness and truth could do. Sitting on the porch one evening, a beer cold in my hand and the stars bright above the fields, I reflected on the fight, not just for my land, but for everyone Vicky had tried to break. It wasn't just about winning. It was about showing that no one, no matter how powerful they seem, can steal your roots if you stand your ground. The farm was more than dirt and wood. It was my history, my home, and now a symbol of fighting back. I opened my laptop, the screen glowing in the dark, and saw comments pouring in on Jenna's online article. Stories from strangers across the country, sharing their own HOA nightmares. It hit me. This wasn't just my triumph. It was a spark for others to push back. I smiled, knowing Vicky's defeat was a warning to every clipboard-wielding Karen out there. My farm stood tall, its fields stretching wide under the moonlight, and I felt whole. What would you have done? Share your own HOA stories in the comments below.